Welcome back, my friends. Come on in, step inside. It's the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach. I am joined by JMic tonight, and this is going to be a little different show. We have done our rookie Hootenanny. We have gone through 47, 50-ish players. We've been very regimented in how we did that. We broke down what we liked, what we didn't like, what we saw their future as being. This is not going to be that kind of show. This is going to be a little bit more freeform, a little bit more of whatever is on our mind. And for me, it's going to be whatever is in my pocket, because I spend all day, every day at work, listening to podcasts, listening to books, listening to occasional lectures. If the mood strikes me, there's a really good Yale econ that's on iTunes that is fantastic, game theory. But anyway, like I'll listen to things and I write stuff down on little scrap paper and tiny like little notepads. And so it's there's going to be some of that. I was telling JMic before we started recording, I got home today and I pulled a note out of my pocket and I started to Google the quote. I'm like, I like the quote. I really was like, the past presses down on us like a book set on our head by a musty aunt. Don't you grow another inch? And I started to look it up, and I realized it was me. Like, and so I'd started to write something. I don't know, at some point during the day, and that thought struck me, and so that's where this show, I think, is headed. It's our ideas, it's snippets, it's whatever comes up, and fantasy relevant. Like, let's not get too crazy. We're gonna help you out. We're gonna bring you along. I am excited to. JMic presses me, pushes me, questions me, asks the questions that I don't even know that I need to know the answers to until he asks them, and then I'm like, that's it. And so I'm excited to have that dynamic back, have that two-way. But uh, we'll freeform this. JMic, sorry, I've talked way too long. Let's get you in here.
Listen, at this point, and as you previously mentioned, the Haze in the Barn, the Hootenanny has completed. The music has died. So what now? And I think that's a great place for us to be able to pick up, Zach, as we walk through this familiar terrain, but yet again, new terrain, fresh terrain. But it looks a lot like a trail maybe that we've gone down before. A couple of trees in different places. So now that we've done the work with these evaluations, what are we doing until the draft? What matters at this point? What are you into at this point that pushes you to continue to find edges, to continue to find space from now till draft time?
So with this rookie class in particular, this is a fun time for me, because now I get to shut up. I start listening to everybody who I value, all of these people that I have been ignoring for the past 4 months, because they're pumping out rookie content too. And I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I wanted to do my own evaluation, but now I am listening. I'm taking notes. I am seeing where I am diametrically opposed to somebody that I value their opinion. And when that happens, I'm going back and watching a player. I am very fallible. There's a good chance I missed something, especially since our sample size is 8 to 12 games. Like, there's a good chance I missed a trade on a player. There's a good chance I completely misevaluated a player. I've John Kelly'd before. I N'Keal Harry'd before. Like we've seen this. And so that's part of my process is now kind of understanding where I am within the landscape of the community and reconciling what I saw with what other people see, what other people's models, metrics are kicking out.
On the flip side of that, though, Zach, if we turn that over on its head, what about the players and the evaluators that you do respect, who are in lockstep with you, who are arm in arm with you, walking down, whatever road that may be, whether that be N'Keal Harry Road or Justin Jefferson Lane? How prone are you to not double count or to not dig in too deeply to where now your opinion becomes one that is incredibly rigid as we walk into the NFL draft season?
So I'm not moving the guys that I like up. Like I'm not double counting if we're in lockstep, if and it's great. Like if Peter Howard says he likes Brees Hall, or I heard him today on a podcast talk about George Pickens, and he says he's got Pickens rated fairly highly. I like George Pickens, but that doesn't move my evaluation of George Pickens. That is a little, yeah, I like this. This is a good direction to go. I am far more interested, and you'll find that I'm this way anyway. I think when I disagree with somebody, I am far more interested in that conversation because that's where I learn. That's where I get better. If I miss and I can evaluate how I missed or why I missed, that is so much more valuable than, patting each other on the back and telling us, what a great job we did, because you're supposed to get things right. Like that's the whole goal of this, is to figure out the path to get this right. So if we're doing that, great. If not, why? What are we missing? And we're not at a point yet where we can definitively say yes we hit or yes we missed.
Right.
I mean, this all plays out in the next 3, 4, 5 years in the NFL. But you can see with draft capital, what the NFL thought, which matters way more than what we think. And so this is the part of the process where I want to see where I'm different from other people, and go back and look and see if I missed something. If I did, great, mea culpa. I will adjust. If I go back and look and see the same thing, sorry, I'm breaking ties to my evaluation. Like I am confident enough in the number of years that I've done this and the success that I've had with it, and the fact that these rankings aren't just like, hey, public consumption rankings. Like when I do film evaluations and when I do my final, rookie rankings, that's how I draft. And so if I'm going to break, I'm going to break with my opinion because I have to live with that team.
That is such an underrated aspect of this time of the year, because I believe there are so many dynasty players who are consuming, whether it be their favorite podcast, whether it be a plethora of podcasts, whether it be YouTube videos, whatever the case or whatever the source may be. There's so much content out there, and a lot of it is really good content, but they're taking in so much. And now they're having trouble deciphering, formulating their own opinion and separating that from the opinion of those with whom they listen to the most. And for our listeners today, I'm hoping that as we continue this conversation and branch off wherever we may throughout the rest of our time, the sheer importance of formulating your opinion, and when you come to the point of breaking ties, trusting the work that you're doing trusting the evaluating that you're doing, or trusting the most trusted voices that you listen to and leaning on those decisions that you make versus leaning on the decision of Zach, of Foreman, of JMic, of whomever else that you may be taking in. I urge everyone, all of you, please make sure that you lean into your own process, because that confidence, that decision, that elation, the failure, whatever it is so imperative for you to be leaning on what you want to do there.
Yeah, and again, it's you're living with your decision. It's your team. It's not my team. It's not JMic's team. It's you're drafting, you're putting together your team. And so like we're giving you our opinion, we're giving you in a vacuum. You know, you hear that, that's such a great phrase, because nothing is in a vacuum. Your league is its own entity, its own living organism. And so, you know, your team and your league are totally different than what we're playing in. And I tweeted out about this the other day, and it got quite a bit of traction, but it was talking about how we consume fantasy information. And the people who are creating content are often so plugged in and play in leagues with other analysts, and it's a, you know, it's hardcore and the margins are narrow, but not everybody plays in that type of league. And so it's, you have to understand your league, you have to understand your decision making process to be able to do yourself justice with these evaluations.
You bring up an interesting point when we're talking about comparing leagues and comparing baselines, if you will, and flow of information. If you would go a little bit deeper there, let's dig in and unpack that a little bit more. When you're talking in reference to our differences from league to league, and especially now being as crucial a time in terms of how we're adjusting boards, how we're taking in this trade information, how we're preparing for drafts, pro days, all these wonderful things are on the calendar. Walk us through, or unpack a little more, if you will, this concept of the baseline of one league being different than the baseline of maybe someone else's league.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, because this is I was on with Peter Howard last night, and spoiler alert, I dropped the asymmetrical approach to leagues and said we're going to talk about this, and this kind of dovetails into that, where, you know, if you're in a league that is just starting out and it's not necessarily you know, a Twitter league or an analyst league or a league that's plugged in, and you listen to Matthew Berry or you listen to the fantasy footballers who are giving advice to a broad range of people, that advice is good advice. It is. But if everybody in your league is listening to that advice, all of a sudden you are not winning with that advice. You have to go down a level. You have to, you know, if Matthew Berry says you should be drafting running backs early, or the fantasy footballers say there's an advantage to drafting Josh Allen in the first 3 rounds, and everybody in your league is doing that, your advantage is gone. Now you have to get down. And what I mean by an asymmetrical approach is doing something that is outside of what everybody else is doing. So now all of a sudden, if your league is listening to Barry and your league is listening to the fantasy footballers, you need to be listening to JJ Zacharyson, who's talking about, you know, a late round quarterback and the strategy that you can gain an advantage by taking quarterbacks later, adding skill positions earlier. Or Jason Siegel, Sean Siegel, sorry, not Jason Siegel, Sean Siegel, who is the zero RB originator and understand the concept of anti-fragility. And that's So all of a sudden now you're playing in a league that's plugged in and everybody's doing that. Well, now you need to attack other margins. And that's like I talk a ton and you and I talk a lot about the psychology of fantasy football. And to me, that's the next level. That's the next place where you can gain an edge. But it's pretty fluid. You can gain an edge with psychology in almost any league you're in. And so that to me is the fun piece of the psychological aspects of fantasy football is because they translate. It doesn't matter whether you're in, a newbie, your first home league, or if you're in an FFPC, full on high stakes, like it doesn't matter. The psychology translates, and there are margins to win with that all over.
One thing I think people will be nervous about, though, Zach, as a counterpoint, people really like doing the things that they've been doing. People really like doing the things that have brought them success in the past. And I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm sure you are. We both have a lot of Disney in our hearts. The Princess and the Frog. And Tiana, they go to Mama Odie, and they go to see her, and then they sing the song, "You Gotta Dig a Little Deeper," and they get to the end of the song, and she's like, "I gotta work even harder, and strive even stronger." Like the whole premise of her having kind of what she needs, and I'm probably mixing up songs at this point, but I love that movie. And I love the fact that like they go through this entire song and they get to the end of it. And she is like, yeah, I just have to do harder at what I've been doing to have success. I just got to strive a little harder and I'll have it. Like I can do it. People are going to resist change, Zach. So where does confidence grow? Where does confidence come when what I've been doing no longer gives me the edge that I've had before? Where am I supposed to dig or grasp for anything that says, okay, out of all the processes that I could be doing that maybe opposite of what I've been doing, maybe opposite of what my league is starting to do, how can I truly feel comfortable with trying to get an edge in an area that I've not had to go to before?
It's the next frontier. That's the my least favorite phrase, and I hear it all the time at work. So I am at a shipyard that has been building ships for 200 years in the same place. And they say we've always done it this way. It drives me crazy. I think that if you do a thing and you only focus on how it used to be done, then you never get a chance to move it forward. And you miss out on that growth. You miss out on improvement. I think we're falling into that trap with rookie analysis right now. And I use the royal we, like everybody, and we're included in that because I've spouted off comps. Matt spouted off comps. I've heard you a couple times compare a player, and we always compare a player looking backwards, and oftentimes, and the metric analysts are falling victim to this too because their models will spit out, okay, these are the best comparable players from the past. I think that, and this is, I've just started thinking about this, so I'm still, you're with me while I'm kind of parsing this out, fleshing this out. But I think we have gone about this the wrong way. I mean, think about when you and I started playing fantasy football, or dynasty football. So I started dynasty in 2014. So it's been 8 years. You're right around there. And when we started out, it was all right. You got to play for a 2 to 3 year window. It was we're waiting on a third year breakout for a wide receiver, right? It totally different now. I mean, you look at last year, the top 12 wide receivers, and you're seeing Justin Jefferson, you're seeing Jamar Chase, you're seeing, I mean, AJ Brown was hurt, but like if you're looking at per game, you're seeing DK Metcalf, you're seeing all of these young guys. The NFL, and I've been talking with Peter Howard about this and have been really surprised with the results. The NFL is shifting drastically to throwing the ball more. Offenses in college have shifted drastically to wide open offenses. You talk about the Texas Tech and the air raid and and you're seeing that sort of thing happen more often. You're seeing a lot more run pass option, which changes the defensive look, which all of a sudden pulls guys. They're doing different things to open up these offenses. Receivers are ascending quicker. Receivers are asked to do more quicker because they're still being drafted highly. They're still being drafted early in NFL drafts, and they are now asked to, because passing is such a huge part of the game in the NFL now, they're being asked to contribute sooner. I think that, and maybe not this class, because it's somebody's going to be good. Like, there are going to be good players in this class. It's so hard to pick them out. But headed forward, I think it's really important to start looking at these trends in the NFL. Not back at college, not back at what players were the model for the NFL, but look at what the NFL is doing and then see if you can find players who fit that, instead of looking backwards and seeing what players they match up with that have come before them. And I think this is increasingly important. And this is a drum that I've been beating for 4 years now, where more and more and more that what would be a traditional X receiver or a traditional boundary receiver, they're being moved in to create mismatches. So it becomes more and more important when you're scouting. And there's a question in the chat. This is great. We've got a chat going on. There's a question in the chat that asks if we've noticed any commonality between rookie round one busts, so Rager and Harry and Ruggs. And the answer is twofold to me. The answer is they all three were set up to do more for the NFL than they were for your fantasy team, especially Ruggs, especially the field stretcher. And the other piece is they were built to do things that the NFL doesn't necessarily do right now. I mean, N'Keal Harry was not a great separator down the field. He was a big player who looked like he should have been a traditional X and the go up and get it guy, but most teams don't do that. I mean, outside of Mike Williams and Mike Evans, who else in the NFL is a traditional Des Bryant, Calvin Johnson X receiver? I mean, they're not very many. And so looking at N'Keal Harry, it was pretty obvious to me, and even in my write-up, like I posted my write-up the other day of N'Keal Harry and said, it's really funny looking back how stupid I was. The hubris I had, and part of it was being a Patriots fan, part of it's watching Belichick do this thing where he takes a player and says, this is your skill. I'm going to use you to do that. And I'm not going to ask you to do what is your potential weakness. I assumed that N'Keal Harry would come in, be a big slot, because he was great inside of 12 yards. He was great on bubble screens. He was great at creating yards after the catch. This is the scary part about Drake London to me. Drake London is very similar. When I read through what the notes I had on Drake London, it's, yeah, he goes downfield and gets vertical separation, which means he's using his physicality, go up and high point a ball. But where he's most successful is close to the line of scrimmage and getting the ball quickly and then yards after the catch. That's really scary if the NFL is looking at him like an X receiver. Rager, Laviska Shenault, those are the profiles where I look at them and said, they have to be schemed open, which means not only do they have to be good in the NFL, but they also have to have a coach or a coaching staff that has the foresight and the creativity to be able to get them open. I listened to the Dynasty Trade Calculator pod today our brethren Russ Fisher is kind of taking the handle while John Paul Hurley is doing paternity leave, and I was listening to Russ and Akash and Izzy talk, and Akash is raving about Laviska Shenault, and I'm like, well, yeah, because you're looking at the numbers, but that only tells half the story. That's just the what happened. But I know how it happened. I know that he was great at tracking the ball way downfield, but everything short, he needed to be schemed because he couldn't create separation on his own. It's a scary thing for me to be relying on an NFL coach to look at a player and go, all right, I am going to take time to figure out how to get you open rather than, have your offense built around the guys who already do. So it's this all ties. It's look forward, look at what the NFL is doing now, look at the players who are being successful, and then attack those archetypes as a rookie evaluator. So the player like Garrett Wilson, who has, and he and Justin Jefferson are not the same player by any stretch, but has similarities to that type of player, can create space over the top, can beat zones, can create separation with quickness, can slide in, can beat press. That's something that I'm looking at. I like Treylon Burks and his ability post catch, his ability to like AJ Brown that a little bit, be a bully when he's got the ball. Like those are things that I'm looking for because that is the direction that the NFL has gone. Quarterbacks, guys who are mobile, guys who move the pocket, and especially guys who are, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. You look at the top of the dynasty rankings right now for quarterback. They're all guys who run. I got in an argument last night with Peter Howard. Voices were raised, epithets were hurled. He may have called me a few names about Trey Lance, and I'm like, I'm not a Trey Lance guy, but I am a Trey Lance archetype guy. Mm-hmm. Trey Lance had 1,000 yards rushing in college, in his last year in college, and he's not a terrible thrower. And give me the guys. This is the Malik Willis argument. Mm. There should be no argument. Malik Willis, if he is on the field, will be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Jalen Hurts is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Mm-hmm. Give me that. But look forward. Stop looking back. Stop looking back to Dan Marino. Stop looking back to Peyton Manning. Like, the NFL moves. And if you're not looking out at the front, you're way behind.
As you walk through those examples, one thing to keep in mind, and you put it beautifully, and I'll say it a little differently for perspective, is the many variables that it takes some players to reach their potential when it becomes their actual NFL teams, which then can turn to produce for our fantasy teams. And part of, I think, what you're saying, Zach, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is one thing for a player to be good at any particular set of skills. But the less dependent that a player is on the variables around them, whether it be offensive scheme, whether it be the deficiencies or proficiencies of a quarterback and the talent around them, if we can find a way to really put a value on players who are able to rise above those many, many variables, and we're not going to be able to account for all of them, but if we can target and really put a premium on the players who and I think I've mentioned this way too many times during during our Hootenanny, the players that you can build a passing game around, where they're not. And when you use the example of N'Keal Harry, what I'm thinking of is him landing in New England, and this is a half-baked idea that I walked through as you were talking through this. Him landing in New England was a really good thing in terms of putting him in the hands of Josh McDaniels and an offense that is committed to leveraging players in situations and on areas of the field that they can be successful. What wasn't ideal is that the fact that with N'Keal Harry being someone who needs help from other people on the field to help him maximize what he needs, specifically everybody else to be really good at their roles, so that the space that he can leverage in the intermediate and short can truly be something that he can maximize. He didn't have the surrounding group in that offense that would help him maximize that space underneath. And so that's only part of it. I know there's a lot more to it that goes, but as you talk through that, that's something that really is beating in my head is these guys who are able to, if they do have a trump card, is it something that allows them to mitigate the deficiencies of what the rest of the offense looks like or what the rest of the situation looks like? I think that's something that's going to be key for us to be able to pay attention to as we continue to evaluate and scan through this new adventure of wide receivers in the NFL for our fantasy teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, receivers becoming, and we've talked about this, but receivers becoming multiple positions.
Yes.
Like there is not receiver. There is, a slot receiver. There is the versatile receiver. There is the X receiver. There is the field stretcher. Like there are all of these archetypes of receiver. There's even the big slot. There's the Michael Thomas, where he is a bigger player, but he's running those slants out of the slot. Like that literally was what N'Keal Harry needed to be. But, and I should have seen this, New England already had a slot receiver better than N'Keal Harry.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trap that we fall into more often with running backs, more often with Kenneth Walker this year, where everyone is telling me Kenneth Walker can catch. Like I'm sure he can. He's a great athlete. He's a fantastic runner, fantastic player. Is he going to be the best receiving back on his team? Because he hasn't been in college anywhere he's been. He hasn't been asked to do it, not because he can't do it, but because there are players better suited to that on his team. You think at the next level, all of a sudden where everybody is the best player, on their college team getting to the NFL, you think all of a sudden he's going to be the best receiver on his team? It could happen. I mean, it happened with Melvin Gordon, but it took an injury to Danny Woodhead.
Mm-hmm.
It took all of these mitigating circumstances for Melvin Gordon, who had, I think his career high, it was similar to what we saw out of Kenneth Walker. And it's not to say Kenneth Walker's a bad player. I had the same conversation about Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is Nick Chubb is the best runner of the football that I have watched since I started scouting. I mean, it's like Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Saquon. And as in terms of runners, Kenneth Walker's the best runner in this class. But pass catching matters so much, and it's worth so many points. And it's hard for me to see not just a path, but like the logical path. The percentage is not in his favor. So the odds of Kenneth Walker coming in and being a bell cow are not high. The odds of Kenneth Walker coming in and being great, I'd put those above average. I think he's a fantastic runner. I think he can come into a backfield. If you put him in Arizona and you brought Chase Edmonds back, whoa, man, that would be dynamic. Or you put him in San Francisco, you put him in Seattle, it doesn't matter, but you put him with somebody who can catch the ball, and he's going to be great. But it's hard for me to see him being that player that's the best receiver in a backfield. And so I think that's, we talk about situation is below talent on our list of priorities, but it ultimately matters some.
Yeah.
It matters if you're going to be the second tier guy doing what you do. And I mean, you mentioned being in a situation that's productive. You look at Mike Evans, who I mentioned as being one of the holdovers, the last bastion of the big prototypical Des Bryant X receivers. You look at his yards, right? 1,051, 1,200, 1,300, 1,000, 1,500. What was the difference there? That was the Ryan Fitzpatrick year. All of a sudden, Ryan Fitzpatrick is hitting him in stride. Mike Evans is getting yards after catch, something he had never done. He was not getting, up until that point, was not getting more yards than he was tall after a catch. And all of a sudden, that year he had like 400 yards, 350 yards after the catch. Like, other pieces matter, and we forget that. And I think especially when you're looking at just numbers, because numbers necessarily are trying to separate that player out away from all of the influences. Like that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But it's not realistic, because eventually you have to put them back in with 10 other guys in an offense.
There's so much in the way of there's so much, and I want to be clear about what I'm saying. And strange enough, it's from Peter Howard, where Peter makes the quote, and I can't remember it exactly, but he says something to the effect of, like, it's a whole lot easier for you to bet against a player than to go about trying to be optimistic and put a bet in for the player. And he puts that way more eloquently than I will. But I love the idea of, and the thought of, there are so many pitfalls that can go wrong for a player. And that includes situation, obviously, that includes so many things in terms of them reaching their maximum potential. What we have to continue to acknowledge is that even with all the work that we are doing, even with all of the film, the numbers, everything that we are doing, and it seems trivial to say this, but we're mitigating failure, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to mitigate failure here. And we can be as excited as we want and be as optimistic or hype as we want for opportunities to come up for certain players or certain positions for these players to land in. Ultimately, pumping the brakes is going to likely be something that we should practice more often than we do, even though we get swept up in this the sensation of the rookies, the endorphins that go flying through us. And I think that that's something we must find a way to suppress, because I don't know that it's healthy for us to continue to get our hopes up every year and then be super disappointed in certain areas where we fall short.
But it's fun. I mean, this is the time of year where we can dream, because everybody is their best outcome until we know what happens. And I think that's where we get caught up as a community. We get caught up. And I know people are mad at me because I've been saying for 3 or 4 months that this class is so flat. It doesn't have the trees. It doesn't have as much as I like Treylon Burks, and as much as I think that he has separated himself out a little bit from this class, he does not compare to Justin Jefferson. He does not compare to AJ Brown. He does not compare to Jamar Chase. And so, yes, he's the 101 or the number one receiver, but that not all number ones are created equal. Not all classes are created equal. The same thing with and people have been kind of knocking Breece Hall, and I'm a little bit on the other side of that. I had Breece Hall graded out very similarly to Najee Harris and Javonte Williams last year. I really like them. I really like what Breece Hall does. I really like his game. I like his ability to not give up yardage and gain chunks of 15, 20 yards. He's not a Nick Chubb. He's not a Jonathan Taylor. Even though you saw that a few times, you saw him. I think I was listening to the DLF podcast the other day, and someone said that he had 5 runs of over 50 yards in his career. I mean, that's nice, but that's not what Breece Hall does. But he's really good, and so I think it's a matter of you've got to understand context, but also if Breece Hall ends up in Las Vegas with Josh Jacobs, that's not great because Jacobs is a good running back. It's going to be a little bit of the Javonte Melvin Gordon. I know we don't talk about Melgo.
We don't talk about Melgo, Zach. Relax.
But that's the kind of thing that you have to understand, and especially running backs are that quick, and now wide receivers are hitting quick, but they have that long shelf life. Running backs, you're looking at, I personally will play running backs. If I draft a running back, I'm gonna play him his first year. I'm gonna play him his second year, and I'm looking to get out. Like that's unless he's transcendent, unless he's McCaffrey, and then I'll probably play that third year, and then I'm looking to get out because inevitably the value, and that's where Russ. I hear that I have the shoulder devil, of Peter going, team old guy, get the points, and then I have the shoulder angel over here that's Russ going, value. You got to get the value, and I have to balance that, and so you talk about, think about 3 years ago where Christian McCaffrey was the unquestioned 101.
Yep.
Saquon Barkley was up there.
Yep.
Alvin Kamara was right up there.
Yep.
And now they're all three barely clinging to top 10 dynasty running backs. And it's because they stepped on someone's foot, all three of them. They're getting older. Father time is undefeated, but it's high ankle sprains. It's it's Barkley stepped on someone's foot, Kamara stepped on someone's foot, McCaffrey stepped on someone's foot. All of a sudden, we don't. And so you got to be looking at how the NFL is working, but also how fantasy football is working. We get a great with Twitter. That's such a good resource because you can get a pulse of the community really quickly. And sometimes and that's why if you look at, and it's funny, because I was asked this question the other day because I followed someone, they had, I don't know, maybe 200 followers, but they'd been involved in a couple of conversations like, this is nice. So I follow them, and they immediately jumped in my DM and thank you, but why are you following me? I said, because first of all, I like to fill my timeline with positive people who are engaging, but second of all, I don't need another 15 people with blue check marks. They're all saying the same thing, and they're saying the same thing I am. I want that pulse of everybody. And so if you look at, I follow, I don't know, 2,000 people, and I follow them because I appreciate. I'm not like a follow back guy. Like I understand that's a thing, and that if that's you, awesome. I am following for my own personal gain.
Preach.
Like your if I'm following you, you are giving me something beneficial. Like our interactions are helping me. Our interactions are making me think. And so that's, I don't necessarily, I don't want to narrow it down to all analysts because you get such a broader reach and a better pulse on everything. And that goes back to the, knowing your leagues, but also for us, knowing our audience, but also broader understanding what everybody thinks of value. And so it's important.
As we finish up this conversation, we've gone down, I feel like, many roads to be able to talk through what moving forward looks like after the evaluation and before the draft. While we're in the meantime, right, in this weird in the meantime place, any final thoughts from you in reference to where we are currently, what projecting forward looks like, and what matters to you between now and as we go to the next portion of the Dynasty offseason regarding the draft?
I am now I'm waiting for the draft. Like,
Okay.
that's the next real big point.
Gotcha.
We did our evals, we watched all the film, we shrugged our shoulders and patted people on the head while they talked about the Senior Bowl. We texted each other back and forth, happy faces and sad faces, while we watched the combine, but we didn't change anything. Like, the Kyren Williams evaluation probably changes, but not until the draft. The Kyren Williams, because all of the guys that we were looking at upside, the Breida, the Austin Eckler, that type of player are all fast. They're all under 4.4. Like, all of them are jitterbugs. It probably changes Kyren Williams, but I'm going to let the NFL tell me it changes Kyren Williams. If he goes in the first 3 rounds, Kyren Williams is still a valuable fantasy player, because what's his primary role? He's a pass catcher. He's a great pass catcher. He's a great pass blocker. He's a player who will be in on third downs at the very least. And if somebody gives him, first 3-round capital, all of a sudden he becomes re-interesting. So it's right now, I think the best move you can make is to be pretty steady, is to not panic, is to not do anything rash, is to not all of a sudden, if you had Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson as your, unquestioned top 2 wide receivers, don't in the next 3 weeks turn around and move Drake London up to 1 because you heard somebody say Drake London is great. Like, if you hear somebody say Drake London is great and you didn't think so, go back and watch Drake London. See if you see him be great, or see if you see him continue to be what you thought he was. I mean, that to me is be measured. There was a quote from John Wooden that I love. And if you don't know John Wooden, kids, you should go look him up. He was okay as a coach. But the quote from John Wooden is, be quick, but don't hurry. And I think, to me, that means when you make your move, you're being decisive, but you're thinking about it until you're ready to make your move. And right now we're in the point where we're thinking about it. Don't be rash. You don't need to be rash. We're not making decisions on these players until after April. Like, you're going to have those, 7 rounds, and then the people are going to be bugging your commissioner at, 12:30 the night after round 7 is done. They're going to be like, when are we going to draft? That's when you have to make your decisions, but you don't have to make them now. Now you're still evaluating. You're trying to get the landscape. You're figuring out, who you like, where you're going to need to position yourself. Pay attention to the guys in your league. Like, if guys in your league are talking about players that you love, you may have to move. You may have to go get somebody. If guys in your league are talking about players you don't like, yeah, you may be okay. But this is going to be a draft where there's not going to be consensus. There's going to be some moving and shaking. I think the value, and I talked about this last night with Peter and Russ, I think the value is going to be in that, in a super flex, in that like 103, 104. Because people get all excited about the 101 because that's the quarterback. People are going to get all excited about the 102 because they're going to be able to get whoever they want between Burks and Hall. 103 or 104, I'm really excited with whoever the other one is. I'm really excited about Garrett Wilson too. And so you may be able to get, especially right now before people are talking about it, you may be able to get the 104 at a discount in a bad class and get a heck of a player. So those are the things that I'm doing right now. I'm not making rash decisions about players. I'm listening. I'm doing a lot of listening. I'm doing some going back and looking. Technology is undefeated.
Undefeated.
Oh, where'd I cut?
You were in mid thought. I was organizing my thought. Um, I don't even know. I can probably go back and listen. Actually, I'll find out.
I was going to say the draft is the last piece of the puzzle.
Those are the things I'm doing right now. I'm listening. I'm not making any rash decisions. You said a couple more words and then
Yeah.
gone.
Yep. That was it. I was like, and nothing worked. I couldn't go anywhere. I'm clicking buttons, nothing. I'm like, okay, control alt delete, nothing. Like, all right, hold down the power and hope. So, all right. So, and I'm waiting for the NFL draft because that is the last piece of the puzzle.
While the Hootenanny has come to an end, I do look forward to the continued journeys down a really interesting avenue as we explore our strategies for waiting, our strategies for making moves, our strategy for strategy, and all that comes with that. In future weeks, pretty confident you'll see Foreman still hanging around. You'll see me still hanging around. And you know Zach's going to be bringing that fire when it comes to the billion and one things that he's been thinking about and jotting down on paper so that he can make sure that he brings his absolute best to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. Zach, as we close up the evening, I'll give you the final word, sir.
Well, I think that next week may be some fun. I'm hoping that the parents will let some friends come over and we can have a little bit of a mock draft, a pre NFL draft mock draft with some friends. I got confirmation Peter Howard will be late, but fashionably, so it's okay. He's on Greenwich Mean Time, you know.
Fair enough. Who else? Okay, so we've got Peter. Anybody else joining us as well?
So I don't know if they even know because Matt Foreman is our master of ceremonies and our kind of our go getter. But I've heard Felix Sharp may be involved. I've heard Chris Moxley may be involved, and the Wayback Machine. And this makes my heart full. I think Riley Bymaster, one of the OG Dynasty Dummies, part of the family, will be back. He's married now. He's a grown up. He's an adult. He's a real boy, but I think he'll be back. And I'm interested to see what he has to say about some of this class as well. You know, we love the Campus to Canton guys. We had to get Peter on because he's one of my favorites, especially in the metrics community. But it's going to be fun to catch up with Riley. It's going to be fun to get his eye for film because he and I don't always see things the same way. Man, is he sharp. So it should be a lot of fun. I can't wait. Great group of guys, a lot of really, really smart analysts, especially when it comes to rookies. So it should be a ton of fun.
Insert applause.gif. Come on. I'm excited. It'll be good to have that crew with us. And especially good to be back with Riley again, as he was with the beginning of the bonanza. Back when we just had the bonanza rolling. Zach, always a pleasure to be able to join you. Thank you for allowing me to walk with you through another thought exercise. Allow me to ask some raggedy questions, and I hope that our listeners are able to continue to gain confidence in their processes, gain confidence in being challenged, and gain confidence in understanding that not having all the answers to the test is okay, because none of us have it. Nobody in your league does. And trying new things offer you the opportunity to grow and find new edges, new ways to rise above your league mates. I'm on Twitter at JMic. Zach's on Twitter at Tacit Assassin 13. It's on you, Zach.
You know, some people may say walk with me. Other people may say that you put me on your back and just carried me through the show. But either way, it's always fun, and it's fun being able to talk to people. Download this stuff. This is great. This still floors me. I've been doing this now since 2015. Well, 2014 into the 2015 season. And it still floors me every time somebody says, "Hey, we listen to your show, and I appreciate you," or "Hey, you're an idiot." It doesn't matter because you're listening, and it's great. We appreciate you being here. Uh, we're on the DFPN network. Make sure that you're following the DFPN network. Make sure you're following the guys over with the network. FF Trader Joe, man, I cannot speak highly enough about him. Anytime you see something that makes me look remotely intelligent or funny, it's probably Joe pulling the strings behind the scenes. The we don't talk about Melgo, that entire montage, that's Joe. I mean, he's great. You should be following him. Sal, Kevin, Steve, Kyle, Kyle, Russ at Dynasty Outhouse, Matt at Fat Mormon. Get the whole family, get in for a group hug, because there's a lot of good fantasy football knowledge in there, but there's a lot of good people in there, and that to me is more important. We talked about this earlier. It's the people and the process. And those are my two favorite things about this entire game: the people and the process. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening.